Hey everybody, this one has been a long time coming. It's my new and improved How to Record Heavy Drums series. The original series premiered way back in 2015, and I figure we're a little bit overdue for an update. So buckle your seatbelts because it's about to get nerdy in here. Oh man, recording drums. Is there anything more mystifying for the beginning engineer out there? Way back in 1989, when I was in college for media arts, it seemed like getting a great drum sound was pretty much mission impossible. I did 3 years at Sheridan College, and I'll just say this, nobody ever got a good drum sound out of that studio. Sometimes it could be passable, but most of the time it was just fucking terrible. Even though that was 32 years ago and there have been seismic shifts in recording technology, it seems getting a good drum sound is just as difficult as it was so long ago. I'm not saying it's mission impossible. I mean, I'm getting this out of my very small drum room here at Spectre. But it does take practice because every drummer and every room you're recording in is different. There's simply no one-size-fits-all preset. It's not like using an impulse response or something out of a sample pack. Yes, you can augment with samples, but I've always considered that to be an absolute last resort once you've run out of better options, because drum samples have a way of making things sound generic and boring. And today's technology is way too easily abused. There is no faster way to make a drum recording put the audience to sleep than by time aligning it. Seriously, that shit's gotta stop. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should! Now, I'm not completely against sample augmentation. I had the honor of having Paul Lani on the show, and where we discussed his mix on Megadeth's P-Cells, which is one of my all-time favorite drum sounds. Needless to say, I learned something from that interview.
I was augmenting just a hint of some drum samples, but I remember I also was... What's that?
Okay, I think I just got owned. Turns out I've liked the sound of sample augmentation for a very long time. So I'm not here to say don't use samples ever, but to use them moderately. My own philosophy here is this: if you're presented with evidence that contradicts your philosophy, be open to trying something new. Otherwise, you're just a fanatic. And I definitely don't want to be a fanatic. Moderation is the key. A little bit of augmentation can be good. A lot of it can be bad. I just finished reading Paul Stanley's biography, and he mentioned that when Peter Criss rejoined Kiss in the 90s, he was such a weak hitter that they had to put samples on him for every single show. Now, if you watch the video for Shout It Out Loud at Tiger Stadium in Detroit, you can see exactly what he's talking about. Drums just plain do not sound like that when they're being hit that softly. And there are a number of YouTube drummers out there that are basically lying to their audiences. If you turned off the samples, they would crumble under the weight of their own bullshit. I want to keep things authentic and, most importantly, show you how to keep things authentic, because a great drummer can make a great metal record. From John Bonham to Neil Peart to Bill Ward to Scott Travis and Dave Lombardo, I could do a 20-minute video just listing off the name of incredible drummers over the years and still never do the genre justice. But most of these guys shine through not because they've been perfected, but because the people recording them had enough self-restraint to let the drummer come through and leave in the imperfections. Because that's what makes drumming interesting. That's where the art is. And I'd rather listen to something where the drummer pushed himself to the limits, like in Moby Dick, or anything on Seasons in the Abyss, than yet another copy and pasted double kick run. Because that's what a lot of metal drumming is today. Copy and pasted perfection. Doesn't that just make your hair stand on end? So for this series, I'm going to break it down into episodes based on what I call the 5 zones. Got one for kick, snare, toms, overheads, and rooms. We're going to take a look at how I process things, not only as individual tracks, but as group tracks, as well as how I use parallel compression on several buses to achieve my final result. All right, so just come over to the desk here for a minute. I want to show you what's going on. So we've got a typical drum mix. This is what I'm working with most of the time. This is kind of like my bass jumping off point where I got mixes going. Now this is done just in the drum room here. That's just Cam doing his thing. And you know, it sounds pretty large. Obviously you're going to have an easier time getting bigger drum sounds in a bigger room. That's just how the physics work. But I've been in here since 2003 and I think I've gotten some pretty good results out of this room over the years. Don't be confused. You know, like when you first start recording your drums, you're like, well, why don't my drums sound like that? Why don't they sound so fucking huge? I mean, it takes a lot of work to get them to sound like that. And this is what this whole series is going to be about, is hopefully helping you guys get some better drum sounds. Just for reference here, here's what the drums sound like completely unprocessed, like with everything off and my buses off, all that kind of stuff. Here's the drums just by themselves with raw mics. Need to bring that up a little bit. Now you hear the drums have a lot of life in them, though. There's a lot of snap on the kick. You know, the toms have a nice little zing to them. They're speaking well into the microphone, so there's a lot to work with there. I'm like, obviously, louder is better. But the point being here is that the fundamentals are good. There's a good sounding kit with a good drummer there, and it's easy to get good results when you've got a good starting out point. I don't really have to jump into any kind of sample replacement or whatnot. You can see I've got trigger up here. I don't even have it on at this point, and this is just set up for a little bit of an extra room sound on the snare drum. Like if we punch this in and out, I don't know if you could even really tell what's going on here, full mix or not. Let's just roll it, see what we get. So we're just adding in a real tiny amount of room sound. Just to give the snare just maybe a tiny bit more depth and space. I'm not actually replacing the initial hits on the drum there. That's just the room itself. So it kind of works the full mix quite nicely. And of course, that's available in the SMG Ironic drum set. I'll throw a link to that in the description as well. Point being is here, you don't have to lose the drummer when you go to samples. And if you've got a small drum room, maybe a room sample over the snare and the kick and toms might help add a little bit more depth to your own hum drum recordings. But once again, just at the fundamental level here, it goes down to 5 zones. We've got kick. Turn that off. That's with a little bit of processing going on. That's with a little bit of processing turned off. And I've got live gear here that's going through. I've got it going through a Trident 808 and then into a Drummer DL241. So that's my channel strip as an EQ into a compressor and then back into Reaper. And this seems to be working out pretty well. This is great because I can just crank up a little bit of processing around, a bit more bite on that kick. That might even be a little too much there. It's a great thing about working with outboard. You can kind of set it and forget it. You know what I mean? It's like once you got something dialed in, you might want to tweak it ever so slightly, but once it's in the ballpark, it really doesn't take you very long to get great results because you know what's going to work and what doesn't. So I might just back that off a little bit. And so that's a little bit more snap there on the kick. Then we go over to the snare. Take out the reverb. Take out the crush. You hear we're getting just a little bit of kick bleeding into that snare mic as well. And we can take a look about that. Seems to be the bottom mic. So we can maybe just gate that a little bit better. There we go. And that's the thing about doing drums, though, it's a lot of it is trade-offs. When you see me adjust the gate on the bottom snare mic there, there's a lot of ghost notes in there as well. So I might want to keep some of that. So it means we might get a bit of that kick beater bleeding into that bottom snare mic, which might not necessarily be a bad thing because you can make all this stuff work to your advantage when you have everything working together towards a common goal. So once again, we're going to take a look at toms here just real quick, show what's going on there. We can treat these a little bit differently. And that's with just a little EQ and compression going on. We're using the AIX drum EQ for these, and then we're using an SLSL native channel strip for the little compression. Again, a lot of the drum processing I like is just EQ into a compressor, EQ first, compressor second, EQ into compression. Does something really cool, actually, where you can push the EQ maybe a little bit harder and then stomp down with it on the compressor and it makes it work a little bit better. Now, these are all basically based off the same EQ. We've just kind of changed the tune frequency from drum to drum to drum, 80 hertz, 75, 75 there, just to kind of go with the different tunings. And then we'll look at the fundamental boost here. We've got a boost here at 160 for Tom 1. Tom 2 are at like 150, and then Tom 3 is all the way down to 75 hertz because that's a great big 16 by 16 floor tom. That thing's a fucking beast. Anyway, it's nice even attack on these things. It's just great. Those just sound wonderful. And then, you punch it back out into the mix and we get this. Once again, it's about making all your mics work together. And again, we've got overheads. Show you how to process those. That's the mics raw. We're using some of the Lautens there. Actually, we're using Lautens all over this kit, and it's working out pretty damn well. Don't like a lot of bottom end in my overheads. That's a trick we all stole from Andy Sneap back in about 2006, where he suggested rolling off your overheads all the way up to maybe 500 and 600 hertz, like just getting rid of all the bottom end in your overheads because we're doing a metal mix, and the bottom end also has to be occupied by the bass guitar and a lot of the guitars and the kick drum as well. So it's all about making trade-offs, not basically making the overheads sound the best they can by themselves, but making them sound the best they can in the context of a mix. And lastly, we've got room mics. And then these are fun too. This is just my tiny little drum room. Turn off the compression I got there. This is what they sound like. So I've got these going out to a pair of Stam 1176s, which I need to review at some point, but wow, do those things ever sound great. And then I've got these on Ascend going out to the drum reverb. Gives the drums a much bigger effect. So as we move further into the series, we're going to look at things like blast beats, ghosting, all that kind of stuff, how you should be approaching it from a mix perspective and miking it and all that cool stuff. Make sure you subscribe for that and make sure you get notified because you're not going to want to miss this. So at the bare minimum, we're looking at 5 episodes, but it's probably going to turn into 10, maybe even 15. These will be posted every Saturday morning, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get notified when those come out. Now, another thing that's changed over the years is that I'm mixing with a hybrid system these days. I'm not 100% in the box anymore. I'm using a bunch of outboard processing for the individual close mics as well as the parallel buses. I've got some recommendations for some killer outboard gear that's surprisingly affordable. I might even add in a used gear buyer's guide to help you out with your search. So where do we start? Well, first of all, start with the kit. What kind of condition is it in? Do the heads look like the surface of the moon? Are the cymbals cracked? Do the kick pedals squeak? What about the throne? Does that squeak? Because the drummer, sworn enemy of the sound engineer, is going to do everything in his power to fuck up your recording. If there's a squeak on the throne, I guarantee the drummer will not tell you about it. He'll just leave you a nasty surprise in the middle of your recording where you're trying to record a nice fade out and you get screech! And I'm not talking about your garden variety black metal in your mom's basement kind of band. This happened on a top level session in Hollywood that I got to sit in on. It's like, for fuck's sakes, when does this end? Are drummers allergic to sticking a small can of WD-40 in their gig bag? Apparently that's as difficult as sending a manned mission to Mars. Now, in my own experience, I've seen a lot of drum sets come in and out of my studio, and most were not in any kind of condition for recording. Because drummers are the second cheapest member of your band, there's a very good chance they won't lay down the cash for new drum heads, even though it's guaranteed to make their drum kit sound better. I got so tired of dealing with this shit that back in the fall of 2001, I broke down and bought myself a set of DW Collector's maple drums just so I could have something in prime condition for recording. And I don't even play drums. Now, some drummers would come in and would bitch, I want to play on my kit. And my response would be, what? DW isn't good enough for you? Where's your tiara, princess? And having a house kit in your studio can have some serious advantages. You can keep it set up permanently and do regular maintenance on it. You can change the heads out when needed and not have to worry about it failing at the most critical time when you're recording the client. You also don't have to worry about the drummer buying the wrong sized heads for his kit. There is no better way to spend studio time like putting everything on hold so you can drive to the music store to go buy the correct heads that the genius on the kit wasn't smart enough to pick out. Hell, even having extra beaters on hand is a good idea. Picture this. Drummer comes in, insists on using his kit, wants that speed metal click kick sound for his kick drum, yet he's using felt beaters and has no kick pad. Drummers have got to be smarter than this, right? Wrong! I've had this argument way too many times with drummers, and it's always hilarious to see their jaws hit the floor when you show them what a kick drum that's been properly set up for metal sounds like. Having the fundamentals in place before you even place a mic is kind of important here. Your kit has to sound like you want it to on the record before you even hit record. EQ can only do so much. So I've had a pretty simple philosophy in here when it comes to using the house kit on clients' records. If you can bring in DW level or better, I'll record it. And that's worked out pretty well so far. Most drummers will back down when presented with this option, unless of course they've got a totally badass kit, and then it's worth the effort for tearing down the house kit and setting up the band's kit. And since I've started with this rule, I've seen some really great stuff come in. Top of the line retail stuff, and even a couple of kits made locally that are one of a kind. None of these have ever let me down during his recording. Usually the guys who bring in those kind of kits are serious drummers, and you know you're gonna have a great session working with them. So these days I've retired the DW kit, and now I'm working with a set of Pearl Masters maple gum provided by Sweetwater and my friends over at Pearl Drums. The toms are a little easier to place than the DWs because they're not as deep, and Gibraltar has upgraded the hardware, so now the kit is occupying less floor space in my very small drum room. We're going to be featuring the pearls on this entire series, but we are going to do an episode showing the difference in the cymbal types thanks to Samsung's cymbals from Turkey. Try saying that 5 times fast. That's going to be quite the episode where we show the different types back to back and hearing just how much it affects the recorded sound. Now, if you're serious about recording drums, the one piece of gear I could recommend getting before anything else is this, the drum dial. This is probably the most important thing you're gonna need because I've only met 2 or 3 drummers who can tune their kit well. And that is since I started recording bands back in 1998. Drummers who think they can tune their kits are much like drummers who think they can play double bass triplets. Many say they can, that is until you actually examine what's going on and then realize that their sad attempt is just an epic fail. And you, the engineer, are the one who's gonna have to clean up that shit. So grab a drum dial, grab a drum, and start to practice your tuning. You know that thing that drummers never do? One other thing I've noticed over the last few years is that drummers fight with me a whole lot less when I ask them to move something. It's really easy to spot a drummer who hasn't recorded for because usually he's got his cymbals and toms barely separated from each other. And this can cause serious issues during mix time. A little cymbal bleed is easy to deal with. A lot can be a total fucking nightmare. Fortunately, software has evolved to deal with these issues in application-specific manners, and we're going to take a look at those as well as some real-world solutions as well, like setting your drum set up the right way. The thing to keep in mind about recording drums is that it's not as simple as throwing a mic up and wondering why things don't sound like you envisioned. Recording drums requires a combination of things that all have to go right in order to create a cohesive sound so that all of the elements work together as one. And that takes practice and experience. It also takes a drummer that doesn't already know everything. Good luck finding one of those.